Hello, so this is a quick screen recording to go over the solutions to the computer lab number 1. So I'm going to look at the solutions in the editor. You can get the source code from this gist. This is linked into the DLE, but we'll just look at the solutions to the first lab exercises. Okay, so question 1, we're asked to input numbers, store them in a list, keep on entering numbers until -1 is entered or a negative number is entered. Okay, so the way I've coded this up, here's my solution. I have data is going to store the list of numbers. It's an empty list. I input the first number, which is the part of the code I show you. Then, because this command inputs a string, and actually I want to convert it to, I want to record the integers. Yeah, I show that here. I have to do this conversion function. Then I have something called a while loop. So in the LinkedIn videos, you'll see this kind of structure. It loops. It keeps doing these commands with the white spaces here until answer is less than 0. Then it'll stop, and it'll come, and the control will go down to here. And then we'll have one of these loops, and this 4x in data loops over what's in data. This append thing, data.append, adds something to the end of the to the list. Okay, so let's run it. Look here. So go here, input a number, 10, 20, 25, -1. And you see once I added a negative number, the list ends. We can see there's this variable explorer. It contains a copy of the variables, and you can see data now. This list contains 10, 20, 25. So this append adds the number into the end. So I first entered a 10, that gets put in the list. Then I input a 20, that goes to the end of the list. Then I did 25, and you can see here that the answer is given as answer is an integer. Answer underscore is a string, then x is an integer. Okay, and for code this, you notice there's no comments in here, and that's because for code this short, I usually don't feel there's any need to do any comments. Okay, and if you wanted to know what's happening to the data string, you could put a print statement here, print data, and you'd see what happens with data as you keep inputting numbers. I'd say later on, so I mean this thing will fail if I inputted a let's run it. So let's run it again. If I input a typo, so I inputted the number ty, just a string, and it fails because it can't convert ty, which is a string, into an integer. And later on in the course, we'll see ways of dealing with the errors, how to kind of gracefully deal with things like that, which will happen quite commonly. Okay, so that was question 1. Question 2 was Python. Essentially, you write a Python function that takes an input of velocity, miles per hour, and prints out a warning if the velocity is greater than 70. So this is my solution again. Okay, and this time I have actually put in a little bit of comments because it does help to just explain the flow of the program. So I have a function here, checks the speed, takes the input v, a variable v, and we use an if statement if v is greater than 70. Print you're driving too fast, slow down. Else, so if this statement is true, if v is greater than 70, it does this. However, if this statement is not true, then it does this at the bottom. Okay, let's see what happens when we run it. your input speed is when it's 50, you're driving at safe speed. When we're at 80, you're driving too fast, slow down. And I said, what are some of the issues that this code? Okay, so it does what I've asked for you. So in the kind of marking wise, I asked you to do this. One of the things I think is slightly problematic is the fact that I've got 70 here. It's usually kind of bad form to have like a just well, not random, to have variables in the code with no real explanation. So at least I would define a variable called motorway speed limit as 70. Let's try and do that. And this is and this is why the code is quite bad, because it doesn't really document why the 70 number there. Okay, so now it's a bit more documented. You can actually see that the motorway limit is 70. So I mean, the issue is, I mean, particularly if you're somebody from who's not been in the UK, you might not know what the speed limits are in the UK. Let's try running it again. Yeah. So I've changed the code. It's a bit more documented now. Without actually writing a comment, you can just introduce a variable. And then we could actually have this motorway limit as actually an argument to the function, because the speed limit, if you're doing it like a self-driving car, or you wanted to have a warning, at the moment this is very inflexible because I have this variable defined, so I could move this this variable into the argument list, and then the function would work for if you're driving in the close to a school and the speed limit is 20, then it would still work. Okay. And later on we'll see how to kind of document functions in a more generic way. Okay, let's go on to question 3. Oh, I should say as well, I mean, if you want, also, if you're writing kind of international software, you probably also want to wrap some of the things. It's very, all the text is as in English essentially. And if you wanted to write, if you're writing a kind of product like Microsoft, which should sell in different worlds, they would wrap some of these things so it actually you'd have another function to print these messages out, and you could change the language then in a more efficient way. And that'd be another way. I mean, normally for data science you wouldn't do that. If you're writing a commercial product, you might want to make it language neutral. Okay, so in this case we're asking the Python list. So we have pets equals cat, dog, 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 cat, dog, dog. And you want to write a program that would count the number of cats and dogs. Okay, so I mean, if you were, so I'm saying about a test-driven development, the way I would do it, if you do it by hand, you say, well, here's one cat, another cat, so there's 2 cats. When you do the dog, you say first dog, second dog, third dog, fourth dog. So you expect 4 dogs and 2 cats. And if you think about the way I've actually, so this is actually developing our test. And the way I'm actually doing this, I'm kind of looping through this list, trying to check, and then trying to check whether I see a cat or a dog. And then I have a kind of counter to do that. So that gives us both a test, and then we should see from this array 2 cats and 4 dogs. Okay, let me clear the console, and just let's clear. Let's clear console. Okay, so this is my code. So like I had in my test, I have a counter for the number of cats, counter for the number of dogs, and then I say, as we see a lot, I loop through the list. So what this X in pets does, it'll loop through cat, and then X will be cat. Then we'll go through again, X will be dog, and the third loop will be X will be dog. Then this if statement, which you'll see the importance of kind of the logic of these things. If dog in X means if you find dog in the variable X, it's true, then I add 1 to the variable no dog. If cat in X, if that statement is true, if it finds cat in the variable X, it'll add 1 to the no cat variable, which is counting the number of cats. Okay, let's click on run. Okay, and I said for my test case, it's kind of test-driven development. We know there are 2 cats from the list we have, and 4 dogs, so the code's passed that test. I mean, in reality, you'd have a much longer list in reality, and but you could just test the routine on a smaller set where you can actually do it by hand. And as I say, I mean, this is the kind of thing. If this is labels of if you're doing supervised learning, and you had some images labeled dog or cat, you kind of use this code to count the number of cat images and count the number of dog images. You know, which is part of setting up a machine learning kind of project. Okay, so the last question is, so we look at a code where all the lines are jumbled, and just the motivation of that is, just because you're new to programming, sometimes when people see a blank editor, they get a bit nervous. But so the way to start this thing up is to actually have some existing code. Then it's a question of just reordering the lines, and I'll show you the solution in the next line. But one of the things, some of the tricks you see, usually the import, well, this program will produce errors when we start. Usually things like import modules, this allows the square root function, this math.square root. This thing should be at the top, or at least before here. And also like this variable here, n equals 4, is defined here, but actually it's used here and here, and if you run this now, it'll create an error. Okay, it's complaining about the spacing. So, I mean, the things I started off by doing was import math, I moved to the top, set n, I moved to the top. Then some of the variables are kind of close together. So here's the thing where we loop over a range. This thing loops over range 0 to n, and I have total. And before I can add something to total, I need to define total 0. So then I move that command to there, and yeah, so I just reorder things. I mean, the first thing you have to have variables have to be defined before they're used, and then I can kind of see some variables like total here. You know, those things have to be close together. Okay, in this command here, sn is printed here, but it's not defined, but actually calculated here, so I'd have to move this to here. And when I do all this rearranging, so I mean, part of it you can rearrange also, you can kind of look at the logic of the program. So now when I run it, let's do the console. Now when I run it, so n is defined here, and then it's used later on. The module maths at the top, totals here, everything's kind of coordinated together. And if we run this, yeah, so this is adding up the sum of the square numbers. So 4 is going to add in, well, then equals 4 is 0 squared plus 1 squared plus 2 squared plus 3 squared plus 4 squared. And you can do a kind of mathematical formula for that, which kind of by some magic, and that's the kind of generic formula. And this total and Sn should agree, which it does. That's the test. And then there's a formula for standard deviation there, and I get a number out Okay, so that's just a short overview of the uh, short overview of the solutions to the first computer.